Thank you for joining us today. I have a very special guest with me.
Hi, I'm Tahseen Rizvi from the UK, and I'm a trauma-focused counselor.
And can you please tell us about yourself?
So, well, where do I start? Let's start at the beginning. So I have five children. Counseling was a recent part of my journey. My trauma, and the reason I got into trauma was because there was a lot of trauma in my life. I have abandonment issues, I have attachment issues, I've had childhood sexual abuse. There's been narcissistic traits of, people in my life who've had narcissistic traits in them. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of trauma. Oh, there was grooming as well. And I talk about it quite matter-of-factly, and anyone watching who's aware might think, oh, she's very dissociated. But I'm not. I'm just used to talking about it because it's part of my journey now.
Thank you. And as everyone knows, we are here to talk about trauma. And would you like to tell us about your journey?
Yeah. So, like I said, I lost my parents died when I was when I was young. So my dad died when I was 9. My mum died when I was 15. I was then sent to live in a foreign country without consent. I don't begrudge that at all because I was with a very bad crowd in London. And so it was in my best interest to go there. But obviously, as that child at 15, not what I wanted at all. So there was a huge abandonment piece there. My brother got to stay in London, and I was sent to India during the first very few, probably from about 6 to about 18. There was grooming, there was childhood abuse, sexual abuse. So there's quite a big narrative of that there. I then came back to the UK. I was meant to marry someone, and he ended up in a very traumatic accident. So again, there's that whole abandonment piece of there's huge loss. Even while I was in India, the people I was staying with, they also died. So death seemed to follow me throughout my life. So there's a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of abandonment, a lot of attachment. There's a lot going on.
Okay. And that must have really impacted your nervous system.
Hugely, hugely. I spent most of my life, probably the first 4 decades of my life, in all honesty, fully dissociated. My go-to was to just smile through everything. I was a chronic people pleaser, because and I wouldn't notice what was going on in my body at all. It was literally just shut down. I was in freeze a lot of time, which is what I mean. I suppose a lot of people pleasing is you freeze yourself to please everyone else anyway, because you don't fight back, you don't, retaliate in any way. You just default to pleasing, which isn't authentic to you, so it doesn't serve you in any way, shape, or form, and it definitely didn't serve me.
Okay. And for our viewers, what do you mean by dissociate?
It's where your system learns to just numb itself off. It doesn't want to, it's like it closes the door to emotion. That's how it feels. You just you don't want to feel the pain, so you close that door. You just think, right, okay, that's done. The other way my system would cope is every new phase of my life, every change that I experienced, it's like my memory bank would shut down and it would close the door to that. So, for example, I a lot of my education in India, I've got friends who have vivid memories. I don't have very many at all. When they remind me, I'll be like, oh, okay, I vaguely remember that. My childhood, I've got very little memories of because, again, my brain thought in my best interest, let's just shut that down. Let's not go there. So yeah, it learns to cope in the way it feels is best for that person to survive, because that's what our brain wants us to do, survive.
And how did embodied processing help you to learn how to not dissociate and start to heal your nervous system?
So when I first got into counseling, and this was very many years later, I'd had five children by that time. And when my eldest was 12, we'd been on a group program where they were doing counseling. And it was at that point that I realized how much my trauma was impacting my parenting. And I realized I'd never allowed her to have a sleepover because it didn't feel safe to me, understandably. And that made her lose friends, And it was something she really held against me. But it was only when we were in that group program that I realized, oh, this is the reason because I didn't understand why I wouldn't allow it. I just wouldn't allow it. But I did allow it for my other child. And it didn't make logical sense to me. But the narratives in my head, they were, it was my psyche that was controlling these kind of default patterns that I had. And so from my view of protecting them, I was over I was really kind of keeping them very close and not allowing them to thrive the way they could. I realized that the hard way. And it was when I was there and I was like, oh my, this is what I want to go into. I can see the impact. And that's where my counseling journey began. And that's where I started understanding the impact. But it wasn't enough because talk therapy is great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't go because your brain is wrapped up in so many different narratives. I've got for example, in my case, I've got a cultural narrative, I've got a religious narrative, I've got societal narrative. You've got all these expectations that are placed on you as a woman in the world. And so I had all these narratives and none of them actually tapped into the feeling side of it. That's where embodied processing came in. It was the part that it's like it got the pieces and it put the jigsaw together.
Okay, thank you. And what advice would you give to our viewers?
Healing is everyone is different. There's no one linear way to heal, but the body piece is huge. It really is crucial because, like I said, your mind can be wrapped up in 1,000 narratives, but your body is authentic. It's what gives you the actual information. Because, I mean, I don't know if many people know, we have a lot more neurons that go from our gut upwards than from our brain downwards. And so when they say gut instinct, there's a reason they say that. There is so much truth to that gut instinct. And we learn to suppress that at a really young age, especially if you're a people pleaser, who's craving connection of some kind. You shut down your gut instinct. So that's where the embodied piece comes in.
That's a nice way to put it. And are you glad you were able to start your healing journey?
Oh gosh, yeah, definitely. A lot of people ask me, would you have ever changed anything in your life? And I always say no, because it's got me to where I am now. And where I am now means I can help so many people not have to live with guilt and shame, which is what ruled my life. Literally, my decisions in life were run by guilt or shame. And so they weren't good decisions that I was making, not for myself, not for my children. I remember when I first started the journey, I went to my children and my older two especially, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I wasn't the parent I could have been. I was a very reactive parent. And also like I was very close to my dad, for example. And what I didn't realize is when I hit the age that I lost him, so I was 9, when my children hit the age of 9, somatically, I didn't know how to connect anymore. So I would shut down. So they would come for a hug and I would freeze because I'm like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. While they were young, I was very huggy, very kissy, very, very tactile. Soon as they hit 9, and I didn't realize this was happening. I realized this afterwards.
Interesting. And that's a lot of times when we are experiencing trauma. We don't always realize we are experiencing trauma and why we're doing what we're doing. Do you find that a lot of clients are experiencing the same thing?
Oh, so many, so many. In fact, when I first started my journey, I was thrown in at the deep end and I was working with domestic abuse victims. And it's incredible how much they face, how much they hold within themselves. And the cognitive dissonance, when you're in a domestic abuse relationship, you don't recognize it because you're living in it. And you learn to justify behaviors that you wouldn't justify if you weren't living in that, if that makes sense. But your
Yes.
brain does that for you. But the somatic imprint that you hold within, that is huge. That's the piece that so many people don't get to access if they're just doing talk therapy.
And listening to your body is huge because your body will speak to you and tell you. And if you're feeling safe, if you're not feeling safe, and exactly what's going on. Sometimes your mind can play tricks on you, but your
Yeah.
body never does.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And that's why I said that gut instinct part, named for a reason. Our body tells us so much. It really does. I mean, even for example, I work with so many people who've had trauma, and they always find that there's a lot of an imprint in their throat. And whenever we explore that, it comes from feeling silenced within that relationship or within their childhood or wherever it came from. But a lot of it comes from feeling silenced.
Interesting. I find I work with a lot of clients and they always have something in their throat as well. And it's normally when they're feeling something in their throat, they need to have something to say. There's something that needs to come out that
Yeah.
they were not able to say before.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. And even the posture, if you look at the posture of someone who's quite traumatized, they try to make themselves so much smaller. They don't want to be seen, especially if you've had childhood abuse. Um, you want to be invisible. You don't want to be seen anymore. And so you are very slouched, you're very hunched up. And the impact that has on your whole body, the pain that you have in your upper back and things like that. So many people will come with body pains, body aches and pains, and they won't realize why. But again, the somatic reasoning behind that, there's so much in that. And also the chemical changes that you have with the adrenaline and the cortisol, that has a huge reason behind it all as well.
And it can lead to long-term health problems because
Yeah.
stress in the body is can do horrific things that a lot of people don't realize. Um, okay, well, thank you so much for joining in today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and giving me the space to share so that, we can all help people heal and not suffer so much.
It's one step at a time and one more person to be trauma informed.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hopefully, yeah. Thank you.